My name is Eleanor Mimi. I am 83 years old. I have lived through wars, recessions, blackouts, and heartbreak. I have buried parents, a husband, and friends. I have bent without breaking. But nothing prepared me for the words that came out of my own son's mouth the night everything changed. "You should be grateful, Mom," Thomas said. His voice sharp but laced with that fake patience he used with his children when they were being difficult. "We gave you a corner bed. You've got a roof over your head. That's more than some people get." I sat at the edge of that corner bed, a narrow thing pushed against the wall of their basement, half hidden by storage boxes and laundry baskets. And I looked at my son, the boy I had carried into this world, the boy I had worked 2 jobs to raise after his father died. Grateful. Grateful for a mattress shoved in the damp corner of their basement, where spiders spun webs in the corners and pipes dripped through the night. Grateful for air that smelled of mildew and detergent. Grateful for being hidden, tucked away like clutter that no longer fit in the picture-perfect house upstairs. As if my very existence was an inconvenience. Before I could even speak, her voice came from the doorway. Claire, his wife, standing there with her arms crossed. Her eyes full of disdain she didn't bother to hide. "She's in the way, Tom," she said. "I can't keep having my friends over with her hanging around upstairs. She makes everything awkward. People don't know where to look when she shuffles in. She's ruining the atmosphere of this house. You know it's true." Her words hung in the air like poison. In the way. Ruining the atmosphere. I gripped the quilt I'd folded on my lap, my knuckles white, the tears pressing hard against my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Not in front of her. Not in front of him. Thomas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's not wrong, Mom. You're not easy to live with." Easy to live with. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of the nights I sat up with him when he was sick, the mornings I walked miles so he could get to school, the years I starved myself thin so he could have seconds at dinner. But all that came out was a whisper. "I am your mother." He flinched just barely, but he didn't take it back. Neither of them did. The silence in that basement felt heavier than any coffin. When they left, closing the door behind them, I sat there for a long time, staring at the cinderblock wall. Their words echoed in my ears until they became a drumbeat of betrayal. Grateful. In the way. Corner bed. I looked around at the basement. The boxes of decorations labeled neatly for holidays, the treadmill covered in dust, the forgotten toys of their children stacked higher than my bed. And me, shoved into the corner like one more thing they couldn't throw out but didn't want to see. I felt something inside me fracture. The bond between mother and son, once the strongest thing I knew, splintered in that moment. And as I lay down on that narrow bed, the cold from the cement floor seeping through the thin mattress, one thought burned through the grief and humiliation. If they thought I was in the way now, they had no idea what was coming. That night, I dreamed of standing in the light of a stage, a microphone in my hand, the crowd's eyes on me, their voices silenced by mine. And when I woke, I realized it wasn't a dream at all. It was a vision. They had buried me in shadows. But I would rise in the light. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. I wasn't always hidden in a basement corner. Once, I was a mother who believed her son was my proudest accomplishment. When Thomas was born, I was 42. Late, the neighbors whispered, too old to be chasing after a newborn. But I didn't care. I had lost 2 pregnancies before him, and when the nurse finally placed him in my arms, I knew I'd been given a miracle. I remember his tiny fist curling around my finger, his cry cutting through the sterile hospital air. In that moment I promised him everything. I would give him the life he deserved, even if it meant sacrificing every piece of myself. And I did. His father, David, was a good man but weak in health. A heart condition stole him from us before Thomas turned 9. From then on, it was just me and my boy. I became both parents, working double shifts at the factory by day and cleaning offices at night. There were evenings when I'd come home bone-tired, my hands raw, my feet swollen, only to find Thomas waiting up with his homework spread out on the kitchen table. "Can you check it, Mom?" he'd ask, his big brown eyes so hopeful. I'd nod, sit beside him, and read through his messy scrawls by the dim light of the stove. When school held field trips we couldn't afford, I found ways. I stitched clothes for neighbors' children, scrubbed extra floors, pawned jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. Anything, so Thomas could stand beside his classmates without shame. He grew tall, quick, and bright. His teachers told me he had leadership in his blood. I told them he had resilience, because every ounce of it had been hammered into him through the fire of my labor. We weren't rich, but I made sure our home was filled with warmth. I cooked meals from scratch, even if they were simple. I filled Christmas stockings with second-hand toys I polished until they gleamed. I sat in church pews every Sunday with Thomas by my side, praying he would grow into a kind man, a man who remembered where he came from. And for a long time I thought I had succeeded. When he graduated from college, the first in our family to do so, I clapped so hard my hands stung. He wore his cap and gown proudly, his eyes searching the crowd until they found mine. Afterward he hugged me tight and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." I believed him. But somewhere along the way, the gratitude faded. When Thomas married Claire, I told myself I would love her like a daughter. She was sleek, polished, ambitious, everything Thomas thought he needed. I welcomed her into the family with open arms, even when I caught the faint curl of her lip at my old-fashioned dresses or the way she avoided my casseroles. "Your mother means well," Thomas would say when she criticized. But he never stopped her. Little comments began to slip into conversations. Claire would sigh about old furniture cluttering the house. Thomas would gently suggest I downsize. When I hesitated to sell the home where I'd raised him, Claire said pointedly, "It's too much house for one person, don't you think?" Eventually I gave in. I sold the house and moved into a smaller apartment. I told myself it was practical. But in my heart, it felt like erasing pieces of myself to make their lives easier. Then came the grandchildren, sweet faces, little hands reaching for me. For a while, those babies were my salvation. I babysat, cooked, soothed colicky cries at midnight so Thomas and Claire could rest. I lived for those moments when a toddler climbed into my lap and whispered, "Grandma, don't go." But even that became tainted. Claire began to complain that I was too soft with the children, that I spoiled them with stories and extra cookies. Thomas would laugh and say, "Mom, you really do let them walk all over you." I laughed with them, but the words stung. Each year the space between us grew. When my health began to slow me, the stiffness in my knees, the trembling in my hands, I tried to hide it. I didn't want to burden Thomas. But Claire saw. And instead of compassion, she saw weakness. "She needs supervision," I overheard her tell Thomas one night when she thought I was asleep. "What if she falls? What if she forgets her medication? This isn't sustainable." Her solution wasn't care. It was control. Not long after, Thomas suggested I move in with them. "It'll be easier, Mom," he said. "You won't have to worry about bills. You'll be with family." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think it was out of love. So I packed what little I had left into boxes. I sold the rest. And I walked into their house with a hopeful heart, praying this was a new chapter of closeness. But I didn't move into a bedroom upstairs. I moved into the basement. A single mattress against a cement wall. No window. No space. Just boxes, dust, and me. And still I told myself to be grateful. I reminded myself that I had shelter, food, family nearby. I swallowed every ache, every bruise of their words. Until the night they said it aloud, that I should be grateful for a corner bed, that I was in the way, ruining their comfort. That was the night the cracks turned into a chasm. I sat awake long after they left the basement that night, staring at the ceiling pipes dripping condensation. For years I had swallowed my pain in silence. For years I had bent under the weight of their dismissals. But something hardened in me as I lay there in the dark. They thought they had confined me to a corner. But one day soon I would stand in the light, and when I opened my mouth, the story they built would collapse under the truth. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The basement became my world. Days blurred together in dim light, broken only by the creak of footsteps overhead. The air was damp, the cement floor always cold no matter how many rugs I layered. The washing machine thudded and rattled beside me, cycling endlessly, their clothes, their sheets, their lives spinning in brightness while mine sat in shadows. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they would remember the woman who raised Thomas, the grandmother their children loved. But every day, their words carved deeper into me until there was almost nothing left. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon. Claire was hosting her book club, or maybe it was a brunch for her co-workers. She always had some excuse for gathering polished women in bright dresses who smelled of perfume and money. I had been told again to stay downstairs. "Don't wander up, Mom," Thomas said, his tone clipped. "It's just easier that way. We don't want people uncomfortable by my presence." So I sat on my narrow bed, listening to the laughter and clinking glasses above me. The smell of quiche drifted down the stairs, warm and buttery, and my stomach twisted with hunger. I had been given a bowl of oatmeal that morning and nothing else. But the ache in my stomach was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. After an hour, I couldn't stand it anymore. I climbed the basement stairs slowly, my hand clutching the railing, my legs trembling but determined. I just wanted to pour myself a glass of water. I just wanted to breathe air that didn't smell of mildew. When I reached the kitchen, the room fell silent. 6 women sat around the island, plates in front of them, laughter caught in their throats. Claire's smile froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "Mom," Thomas hissed, standing quickly, his face flushed. "What are you doing up here?" I blinked, startled by the sharpness of his voice. "I just wanted some water." One of the women glanced at the others, pity flickering across her face before she looked down. Claire recovered first, laughing lightly. "She gets confused sometimes." "It's fine." "Confused." I froze in place as if she had slapped me. "I'm not confused," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I just wanted a drink." Thomas's jaw tightened. He grabbed the glass from my hand, set it firmly on the counter, and took my arm. "Mom, please. Go back downstairs." "Tom. Now." The word cracked like a whip. I looked at him, at my son, the boy who once clung to me when nightmares woke him in the night. His eyes, the same eyes I had loved since the day he was born, were cold, embarrassed, angry. Claire's friends sat in silence, shifting uncomfortably, no one daring to speak. With my dignity bleeding out of me, I turned and shuffled back down the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the basement, I collapsed onto the bed, tears burning my cheeks. That night Thomas came down. His face was stern, his tone clipped. "Mom, this isn't working. You can't keep wandering around when we have people over. Claire's friends don't know how to act around you. It's awkward." Awkward. That was the word he used for his own mother. "I raised you," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. "I worked myself to the bone so you could have a life. And now you call me awkward." He looked away, shame flickering across his face for just a moment before he buried it under a sigh. "You should be grateful, Mom. We gave you a place here. But if this doesn't work, we'll have to look at other options." Other options. I knew what that meant. A nursing home. Facility. Anywhere but here. When he left, shutting the basement door behind him, I sat in the silence, shaking. My body felt hollow, my heart shattered into pieces too small to ever fit back together. For the first time I wondered if they were right. Maybe I was nothing but a burden. Maybe I really didn't belong anymore. But then, the image came back to me. The stage, the microphone, the light. I remembered the times I had spoken at church years ago, telling stories that made people laugh and cry in equal measure. I remembered the way my neighbors once leaned in to hear me speak, how my words carried weight. They wanted me silent, buried in the basement. But my voice was still mine, and I would use it, not in whispers, not in shadows, but where the whole world could hear me. As I lay in the dark that night, the pipes dripping rhythm above me, I whispered into the emptiness. They think I'm invisible. They'll regret the day they pushed me into the shadows. Because when I step into the light, their perfect image will crack wide open. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The morning after Thomas threatened me with other options, I lay on my narrow basement bed staring at the exposed pipes above me. For hours I replayed every word. Grateful for a corner bed. In the way. Confused. Awkward. I could have let those words bury me. Many would have. But something hardened inside me. I hadn't survived 83 years to be erased by the very people I had given my life to. I swung my legs off the mattress, pushed myself upright with my cane, and began to plan. The first step was remembering who I used to be. Long before the basement, long before Claire's polished brunches, I had been a storyteller. At church, at school events, even in the break room at the factory. People leaned in when I spoke. My voice carried, my stories mattered. I had always believed words could change the course of a moment, sometimes even a life. That belief hadn't died. It had only been smothered. So I began to write. Each night, when the house above me grew quiet, I pulled out a worn notebook I had kept for years and began to fill its pages. I wrote about raising Thomas alone after his father died. I wrote about the double shifts, the hunger I swallowed so he could eat seconds at dinner, the nights I rocked him through fevers. I wrote about the sacrifices, the love, the laughter, and yes, the disappointments. But I didn't stop there. I wrote about now. About the corner bed, the basement, the humiliation of being told I was in the way. I wrote about Claire's sharp smile and Thomas's silence. How the boy who once promised to take care of me had turned into a man who shoved me into shadows. I didn't hold back. Every line was a blade. And with each word my voice grew stronger. A week later a flyer caught my eye. Claire had tossed it in the recycling bin, but I salvaged it. It advertised a local storytelling event at the community center. Voices of Maplewood. Sharing the stories that shaped us. My heart pounded as I held it. That stage in my dream. The microphone. The light. Here it was. I slipped the flyer into my notebook. They wanted me silent. Instead, I would speak where they couldn't stop me. In front of their friends, their neighbors, maybe even their colleagues. And I would speak the truth. In the days leading up to the event, I played the part of the defeated old woman. Kept my head down. I stayed in the basement during gatherings. When Claire barked orders or Thomas sighed about my forgetfulness, I lowered my eyes and nodded. Let them think I was shrinking. Let them think I was too weak to fight back. But each night I rehearsed my story aloud, pacing the basement, my cane tapping against the cement. I practiced my pauses, my tone, my delivery. I could almost hear the audience's silence as I reached the part about the corner bed. I imagined their polished image crumbling, their friends whispering, their colleagues questioning. The thought sustained me. On the day of the event, Claire prattled in the kitchen about attending with Thomas and a few of their friends. She wanted to be seen, admired, envied. She mentioned the community center stage. How lovely it would be for networking. They had no idea I would be there. That morning, I dressed in my best clothes. A navy dress Henry once said made my eyes look like the sea, my silver hair neatly pinned back. I looked in the mirror and, for the first time in months, I saw myself again. Not a burden. Not dead weight. A woman who had endured. I tucked my notebook into my purse and slipped out of the house while they were busy upstairs. As I stood in front of the community center that evening, the golden light spilling from its windows, I felt my heart pound with both fear and exhilaration. Inside, voices buzzed, laughter spilled out, and somewhere among them I knew were Thomas and Claire, ready to parade themselves before the town. But they had no idea what was coming. By the time I left that stage, their perfect image would lie in ruins, and the story they had tried to bury would be the only one anyone remembered. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The community center smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee brewing at the back. Rows of chairs filled the wide room, and the chatter of neighbors, colleagues, and strangers bounced off the high ceiling. I slipped in quietly, notebook tucked under my arm, my heart thudding like a drum. On the far side I spotted them. Thomas in his tailored jacket, Claire in a cream blouse that shimmered under the lights. They stood with a small cluster of friends, laughing, sipping from paper cups. My son's eyes brushed past me without recognition. Maybe he hadn't expected me out of the basement, dressed in the navy dress that once made me feel like more than just a mother, more than just a shadow. I chose a seat near the aisle, close to the stage. The host began, welcoming everyone to Voices of Maplewood, a night dedicated to sharing the stories that shaped us. Applause rippled through the room. One by one, speakers rose to tell tales, of childhoods, of triumphs, of losses. The audience listened, clapped, laughed at the light moments. But my hands clutched the notebook tighter with every story. My turn was coming. When the host finally called my name, "Next we have Eleanor Mimi," a hush fell. I rose slowly, cane in hand, and made my way to the stage. The microphone loomed before me. The light was warm, bright. I cleared my throat and began. My name is Eleanor Mimi. I am 83 years old. I have lived through loss and hardship, through hunger and backbreaking work. But I want to tell you about something more painful than all of that. Something happening not in the past but now. The audience leaned forward. I raised my son alone after his father died. I worked until my hands cracked so he could eat. I sold the roof over my head so he could have a better life. And I believed, foolishly perhaps, that when my body grew weaker, when my steps slowed, when I needed him most, he would remember. That he would honor the sacrifices I made. I paused, my eyes sweeping the crowd. I found Thomas's face. His jaw had gone rigid. Claire's eyes narrowed. But instead, I continued, my voice rising, I was given a corner bed. In the basement. Among boxes and dust. Told I should be grateful for it. I was told by his wife that I was in the way. I was told by my son, the boy I once held against my chest, that I was awkward, that I should stay out of sight when they entertained their friends. Gasps stirred through the audience. Whispers rippled. I pressed on, my voice unshaking now. Imagine devoting your life to someone, only to be hidden like an old coat. Imagine being laughed at for the tremor in your hands, pitied for the years you survived, dismissed as if your love meant nothing. That is what I endured. That is what I still endure, at the hands of my own flesh and blood. The silence in the room was heavy. Eyes darted toward Thomas and Claire, who shifted uneasily under the weight of dozens of stares. I closed the notebook and leaned closer to the microphone. But I stand here tonight not as a burden, not as a shadow. I stand here as a mother who has been silenced too long, and I am taking my voice back. My story is mine to tell. And now, it belongs to all of you. Applause erupted, sharp and unrelenting. I stepped down from the stage, cane tapping against the wood, my chest filled with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Around me, people murmured words of sympathy, of outrage. Some shook my hand, Others touched my shoulder gently as I passed. But all eyes eventually turned to Thomas and Claire. Their friends, those polished, perfect companions, began to edge away. One woman whispered something sharp to Claire before walking off. Another man clapped Thomas on the back with an awkward chuckle that rang hollow. Their faces flushed crimson. For once, it was not me who was awkward. It was them. Thomas wouldn't meet my gaze. Claire's lips were pressed so tight they nearly disappeared. I walked past them slowly, letting the silence between us do the talking. By the time we returned home that night, the house felt different. The walls seemed to echo with what had been spoken aloud, the truth that could never be unsaid. Thomas hovered near the door, his face pale. "Mom, you didn't have to." "Yes," I cut in, my voice steady. "I did. Because you would never have told the truth. So I did it for you." Claire glared, but she said nothing. I descended to the basement for the last time, gathered my few belongings, and called a neighbor who had offered me a spare room after the event. I walked out of that house without looking back. For years, they had tried to bury me in shadows. But I had torn the curtain down. Their image was ruined, their reputations shattered. Everywhere they went in town, people remembered my words. And I was free. Weeks later, I received a letter from Thomas. "Mom, Claire barely speaks to me. Our friends avoid us. I've lost clients. You've destroyed everything." "Why?" "I was only trying to give you shelter." I folded the letter, placed it in my notebook, and whispered into the quiet. "You gave me a corner bed. I gave you the truth. Now live with it." I closed the notebook, set it on my nightstand, and for the first time in years, slept peacefully. They thought I was finished. They thought I would fade in the shadows, grateful for scraps, silenced in their basement. But I found my voice again, and when I spoke, their world collapsed. Their friends turned away, their reputations burned, and I walked out with my dignity intact. No soft ending. No forgiveness. Just the truth. If you want more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold, subscribe and hit the bell so you'll never miss the next one.